We have a hot topic today, and it is for those who are brave. And I'm actually going to give an extra heads up. This is definitely not for little ears to be around. I don't know that any of our episodes are appropriate for that, but we are talking about orgasm and specifically the orgasm gap between men and women. So I just want to encourage you right now to be warned. We're going to get into some specific details here. We absolutely are going to give you practical tips. If you find yourself in this gap more than you want to be, hey, this is going to be wonderful and helpful. So we are so glad you are with us. And to frame this as a question, could it be that one of the reasons that wives aren't interested in sex as much, could it be because they don't experience pleasure? Wow. Wow. Katie Ann, you think that's possible? Wives
I-
aren't experiencing as much pleasure, and maybe that's why they're
Yeah,
not as interested.
for sure, for sure. Because then that's the element of it becoming more of a chore or a
Ah,
duty versus you receiving the benefit that God intended it to be
right,
and to
right.
bring. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Mary, certified relationship coach, Christian sex educator, empty nester, and happy jet skiing wife who believes God's design for sex in marriage is too good to stay quiet about.
And I'm Katie Ann, senior pastor, wife, mom to four kiddos, and I always love having some fun, even when we're diving into the deep and holy conversations about marriage and sex.
So, welcome to the Sexual Wholeness Revival podcast.
So, Mary, I have a load of questions on this, and I am a naturally curious person. So, I can't wait to get into this and ask you, first of all, why do you think it's so important that we are talking about the orgasm gap?
Well, we are Christians representing God's original design, and our podcast is called the Sexual Wholeness Revival. So, talking about this is extremely appropriate for Christians because it's not a worldly issue, it's a marriage issue. And we want to absolutely take care of husbands and wives and give them tools so that they can relate well to each other, relate better than they have. And Christians have felt shame around sex for eons. They felt shame around pleasure. Pleasure is not a four-letter word, but oh my goodness, it might as well be because
Right.
of all the hesitation. So I believe that it's important for us to have these conversations. We want to bring it to the light. Nothing sets well in the dark. And when we bring it to the light in respect, in honor, in light of God's word, then there's no more fear. And my goodness, fear is what's been holding us back. Even with just conversations, husbands and wives between them, they won't even talk about what they're experiencing in sex with each other because of fear. So we absolutely want to reduce fear. And with that openness comes the truth and more connection. And it just stirs up the hope of what you wanted marriage to be when you said, I do. So we are talking about these things in the best possible framework, all because God's gift to marriage is good, and we get to learn more about it all the time.
Yeah, that's so good, Mary. That is so good. Okay, that really excites me because I think the lack of understanding is part of the
Yes,
issue. So, our goal is to bring more understanding. And with
that's
that,
it.
can you just describe or explain a little bit more about what we're meaning when we say the orgasm gap? What is the orgasm gap?
Yes, and I've got some numbers for you. Here are some statistics. We can prove what is going on here that men climax more than women. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but let me tell you how much more, which is why we call it a gap. Men would be 85 to 95% of the time during sex, during intercourse, that they will orgasm. They will climax. Women is only 54 to 65%. So the gap is 24 to 30%.
Wow.
That is noticeable. And if a wife is continually not experiencing an orgasm, then it begins to do many things to her self-respect even. There are some couples that haven't discovered yet how to help the wife orgasm, and we will unpack that in a little bit. So maybe it was in the never category at some point, but we want to make sure that there is all kinds of mutual activity going on. This is happening even in loving, godly marriages. So it's not like the orgasm gap is just because your marriage sucks or you're not working well together. It's also not because women are just too complicated. We can't have that line of thought. That works against everybody.
Man.
Really, what's going on, this gap just reflects how sex has been taught, how it's been modeled, and how it's been practiced. So we are going to give some information to help you get past the gap.
Yeah. Well, that is crazy statistics. I mean, that really brings it right into reality, just how big that gap is. So why does the orgasm gap occur in the first place? Like, what is going on
Yeah.
in the mechanics? Because I think not everyone understands that it's not just something, there's actual mechanics in our bodies and our
Yes.
design involved. It's scientific.
Yes,
So what are
absolutely.
they?
First of all, orgasms, the focus of this has been male driven, been male centered. And some of that is just traditionally who wrote the books. And women's voices have not been heard like they are now. Last 20, 30 years, my goodness, things have changed so much. But historically, information was gathered from men, information was recorded and released by men. So all of the books were written from a male perspective. We are changing that now, but the methods that were taught, the idea about what is sex and how does it happen, was focused on what the male would experience and what his interests were. And intercourse is I don't have statistics on how often that is the form as to where the climax is happening, but that is the traditional way. Women don't experience climax during intercourse as much as men. And part of this is biologically, because her primary area of stimulation is the clitoris. And that has been ignored and that has been shamed. There's just so much silence in general around female arousal because it's just been focused on the man and is he getting what he wants. It just grieves my heart to say those words when I know how far away that is from God's design. God made Adam and Eve. He made them to come together and to have this mutual experience of satisfaction and respect and honor and bonding. So for it to be male-centered really has skewed us from what God's design is. Now, the church traditionally has taught that women are just supposed to adapt and that they're not supposed to think about themselves. And that did cross over into sexual teaching or sexual silence. Unfortunately, a lot was taught through silence. So the idea in the church has not supported this mutual place of respect and satisfaction. Now, outside of the church, unfortunately, pornography has been a terrible teacher but
Yeah.
also astronomical numbers of people are accessing porn and at earlier ages. So even though it's not a good teacher, it's a prolific teacher. And what porn has trained men is to expect an instant climax. They are guaranteed through pornography from what they're watching. I'm not talking about what men are actually doing sexually while they're watching porn, but just the images through porn are displaying that that's the norm right there. And what's equally harmful is that porn shows women as orgasmic on demand. So in this image that people are watching, the man is always going to have an orgasm and the woman is always going to be there for that experience. Now we know it's not true and it doesn't represent reality. It doesn't represent our bodies in the natural, much less spiritually how God designed interaction. But if that is the image that is being viewed and internalized, it is setting a standard, a terrible standard, but still there is a standard there. And one other thought about women and why this gap occurs is that for a woman to get to the place of orgasm, she requires relaxation and trust, to be seen, to be heard, to be known, this sweet spot of emotional connection where she can fully give herself, and she needs to feel safe and have conflicts resolved. Wow. Wow. Very much a gap there from what the church has communicated or what pornography has communicated.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting to me too. Years ago, I had a client and they said that they were struggling in their relationship,
Mm.
and in that process they were struggling to climax together at the same time. And we had to delve into that and unpack that a little bit. And it's not what Hollywood portrays it. It's not like that all the time. That should not be your standard. That should not be, you got to look at it through meeting each other's needs. And that was really
Yes.
eye-opening for them because they thought there was some failure in
Right.
their sex life, that this thing wasn't happening like it's been portrayed. And the relaxation, like it's so much more emotional for us as women to
Mm.
allow our bodies to go there. And sometimes if there isn't that communication happening, it just is a no-go for some women.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, this is part of the reason why we're, sounding the trumpet on some of this stuff, because there's hope and there is help. And
Mhm.
this is really important to talk about and address. So, what happens when the orgasm gap is not addressed? Because we just need to understand, like, if you're living in this dynamic, there is something that happens when there is an orgasm gap that plays out emotionally in your relationship as
Yes.
well.
I'm going to speak to the wives, the husbands, and to the marriage overall because we do want to highlight things are happening negatively that maybe you've swept under the rug and thought, oh, it's not that big a deal. But really, there are some repercussions. So for a woman, she may begin to disconnect with her body and have those internal thoughts of what's wrong with me? Why can't I? Whatever, fill in the blank here. And then she also may withdraw emotionally from her husband or just from this part of their marriage. It seems like failure upon failure, frustration and pressure. And she just doesn't want to go there because of how negative it's been. Now, some women fake it and think that they are lessening the impact that their husband, if so he won't feel rejected. But anytime there's deception, it will not be a blessing. It will not
Yeah.
bring life. So it's not worth it and it's not solving anything. And then a really sad place for a wife to go through all of this is resentment. And once again, she could resent herself, her husband, marriage, sex, God, I mean, just fill in the blank. And, this is something that I personally went through with resentment, and I justified it. And when you feed that, it grows, and it does not bring you healing. It does not restore anything. Resentment is what the world preaches. Get back at them. Take revenge. Just harbor that ill feeling. But it's not going to help your marriage if that's where you stay. Now, husbands, this is interesting, because if the wives have been just pointing their finger at him, and why does he always expect this? Well, a husband can feel confused, because my wife might be saying, I'm fine. Everything's fine. It's no big deal. Let's just keep going. And he's like, now, wait a minute. She's saying it's fine, but she just can give the cold shoulder. She can give silence. And he senses things are not fine. How can she say, yes, it's okay, and then still with her body and her actions, she's saying no? So he's confused by that. And a lot of times when husbands are trying to get information from their wife at that point, it can stir up a lot of pain. And a lot of the times I'm helping couples to walk through that place. Another thing for a husband, if he's unaware, and I know wives might be rolling their eyes, certainly he's aware, but if he's unaware, he may accidentally fall into selfishness. If his wife does not speak up and say, this isn't good for me, this isn't working for me, this isn't what I hoped it would be. If she is not voicing that, then he doesn't know, and he may just continue in what he's doing. So not to put the layer of blame on either spouse, but just to realize there's more you can do to communicate here. When this has become a habit in the marriage, then sex feels transactional. It doesn't feel like bonding, and everything is less than what it could be in the marriage. It really reminds me of those couples who say, well, everything's fine except for our sex life. And I'm here to say, no. If there are problems in your sex life, then it is doing far more harm to your entire marriage than maybe you ever realized.
Yeah. Yeah. And that really is just, those dynamics can get so painful. And to say everything's fine except for this. And it's like, well, that's such an important piece that needs to be addressed. I'm really grateful that I'm married to someone who has done an incredible job to make sure this aspect of our relationship isn't transactional. And he's gone above and beyond to make sure that he's protecting my heart in the process of it. And just, I think some people just don't know. So this painful dynamic is just that, painful. But what can couples do to manage and even close the gap? Because there's hope.
Yeah, yeah,
There's hope.
yes. Well, get educated right off the bat, which is why we are having this conversation, even though it might feel a little uncomfortable. But education is going to help so much. And I mentioned earlier knowing about how men and women climax, and there's different types of scenarios where that happens. Certainly, penetration would be the most common way through intercourse, but having stimulation throughout the body, the clitoral stimulation, is where a woman gets most of her response. And knowing about how to build arousal is just excruciatingly important for couples. Not many couples are both spontaneous and both ready to go and both able to just engage sexually at any time. So education is absolutely going to help with that. In addition to that, I would make connection your goal, and not, oh, we both have to have an orgasm, your goal. And we hope that pleasure is forthcoming and whatever steps you need to take to get to that place, that it will happen. But prioritizing your oneness, your connection is going to relieve some pressure. So that especially the wife knows, I am wanted and desired and loved and treasured just where I am, just at this moment, that there's not this expectation you have to make this certain thing happen. That is going to remove pressure, as we talked about earlier, about some relaxation. And that will let her transition to that place easier. A part of connection is talking about your preferences. I wrote 2 books. Why can't I talk to him about sex? Why can't I talk to her about sex? And I will put that link in the show notes for you all. But because I know it's just difficult for couples to have these very frank, direct conversations. But it's so helpful when you as an individual understand what your body responds to, and you share that with your spouse, and then you encourage and guide one another how to touch in that way to build up the stimulation. And something that we've not said at all, how to close the gap. Well, there could be physical pain and there could be emotional pain. We cannot overlook physical pain. It happens for men and for women, much more common for women at different stages in their life. A lot of it has to do with hormones. That's going to be a part of the education process. So those types of pain we need to address. And I'll call it spiritual pain. Meaning, if you have had beliefs around sex that are just packed with shame, then it's going to be difficult to give yourself to sex if your spirit is saying no the whole time. It's interesting because our body can be aroused. The whole stimulation that happens within the body can respond separate from your mind and your emotions and your spirit. But it's so much better when it is all together there as one.
That's so good. That's so good. Why is it worth the effort to bring this into the open? Because I think some people, it's just so scary. But why is it worth it? What's on the other side of bringing it into the open or bringing it to the light?
Oh, yes. Well, we get to be a part of God's design, and pleasure is a part of God's design. So I know we are more aligned with Him when we have some of this understanding. So it's worth it to know what good gifts did God have planned for us, and the mutual respect, satisfaction. Oh my goodness, it does bond you. It does make you stronger as a unit. So if you're going through any type of a conflict, you already have that I'm on your side feeling, which helps a lot so that the conflicts don't divide you, but they join you closer. This will help you to grow as a lover and not as a performer. Sexual intimacy in marriage by God's design was never meant to be, you have to do A, B, and C. It was, you are invited to know your spouse closer and deeper with more love. There's only good in what God planned. And if you haven't experienced that, there's more for you to learn. Sometimes there's some healing you need to go through as an individual. It could be spiritual, emotional, and physical, but it's worth it to get to that place because it does bring more security for you as a person. And there's just always the ripple effect. When you are feeling more at peace in understanding God's design, then that's what you bring to the marriage. And
So
then
good.
that just extends. It's a feeling of love and security for your entire
So good.
field. Hmm.
Yeah.
And it's worth it. It's worth it. Yeah. And if you want to study this out a little more, I have a free ebook for you. It's called God's Gift to Marriage. And we unpack all of the ways that God has a plan. He's not embarrassed. He's not ashamed. He's not worried.
Yeah.
And just as a quick recap, I use the word gifts to explain how God sees sex. He says, G, it's good. I, it's intimate. F, it's fierce. T, it's timeless. And S, it's sacred. Each one of those parts create this beautiful picture of sexual wholeness that is what we're all about and what we are encouraging through this podcast.
Yeah, that's so good. Thank you so much, Mary, for just explaining all of this in such a easy to understand way. I appreciate your wisdom in all of this. And until next time, let's bring back wholeness.